basically, this is the second part of the stress management seminar, the Mind, Body, Being series. Thank you to Sabahatanti for the hosting it, and for all of MWO, Muslim Women's Organization, for helping put together this event, as well as ICMA Relief. So I'm going to just basically go over a small part of what we discussed in the first part of the seminar. Who was here last time? Let's do the first time. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so does anybody want to give any input before I begin? What were some of the things that you remembered? Oh wait, I don't want you to. Don't cheat. What were some of the things we talked about last time?
Well, the most important thing that I remember is about going to your safe space. And I have been practicing that at the breathing technique, and it has helped me a lot.
Good. Do you remember what the breathing technique was called?
1, 4, 3, 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good job. Anybody else? Do you remember? Oh, you said you think, right?
I just wrote down my, what I was grateful for. I've been doing that and doing a lot of affirmations every single day.
Good.
So,
Are you the one who did the gratitude? You did the homework?
yes.
Could you share the homework that I had given from the first seminar was to complete a gratitude journal. I don't know. Did you complete it? No. Did anybody work on their gratitude?
I did, but I left it at home.
Okay. So how did that's okay. That's okay. So you were doing three things you're grateful for every day?
I did actually 3. I started off at 3 minutes, ended up more. So that's yeah.
And how was that experience for you?
Great. It does put a light into your life, and whatever stress you're going through, once you have a reminder of those things that you are grateful for, then it makes it easier throughout the day.
So would you like to share some of the things that you were grateful for when you first started, and then where you are now? Because it's a lot of self-reflection, right?
Right.
And you could have started off with, I'm grateful with very basic things. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my house. I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful for these kinds of things. But then as you get into it, you start to become more detailed and specific onto what are some of the things that you're grateful for.
Yeah.
So I would really like if you could, if you're comfortable enough, I don't want to put you on the spot.
I don't mind. In my world, I feel everybody goes through the same thing. It's just who's brave enough to talk about it. It's not so, So I believe, when did we start?
It was
in February? It was in January, right?
January.
Yeah, grateful. Okay, I think this is the one I wrote here. I am grateful for my children. Was it the 21st? No, somewhere in January. Anyways, I'll start with there. I'm grateful for my children and I being healthy. All of our organs are aligned, working, our senses aligned. We are mentally, spiritually, and physically healthy. Grateful for time, grateful to live in a home with my children. That was like the first when we were here.
okay.
That's what I put. So,
And now something more recent.
I don't know if you want me to read this. I could show you how long it extended.
Oh,
Because it's
wow.
like 2 pages.
Okay.
Where it became more. And it starts from here. You can see that from there. From here to here.
Wow.
So that's where it ended up.
So that's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that
Yeah.
it worked, because it really does. A gratitude journal, it really does have a positive effect on the mind and body. Because basically, every day we get so caught up into our busy life, and we don't become grateful for what's around us, right? We don't become grateful for the things that we are blessed with. And when you start writing it down, what are some things, like one thing that you mentioned in that, like recently?
Positive energy, positive mental energy flowing into my direction.
Right.
Every
So you start becoming more detail oriented on like very specific things. Like, who thinks about positive energy, right? Are you grateful for positive energy? That's not something that would cross your mind as you begin a gratitude journal. But as you progress, you've been doing it since that day, so it's about 2 months now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as you progress, this is just the fruits of the labor, right? We're basically of a gratitude.
Question about positive energy. Is it true that some people are really, like have a natural ability to have more of it and some people have less of it?
It kind of is, okay, there's two approaches with that. Some people, it goes into your aura. Some people talk about that, which Islamically, there's two different approaches where people use like the Hinduism and Buddhist approach to it, where you can feed off of different kinds of energies and auras and that kind of thing. And there is kind of energy that you can let go, right? There's not the non-Islamic perspective. I do believe, yeah, there's an energy, some people can have a good energy, but we don't go divulge too deep into it where we drift off into un-Islamic approach. So when you do talk to a therapist about energy, they can go into that aspect of it, of the Hinduism and Buddhist approach of it. I personally just I touch base on positive energy. For example, anybody can have a positive energy, just your outlook on life, right? Which we're going to go into talking about empathy. Because how are we tying in empathy with stress relief? Being empathetic can have a huge, a really good positive approach to stress management. Because if you were to tell me something about your cat passed away, and you're really sad about it, I'm like, I'm so sorry about that, get a new one. If I just say, get a new cat, I'm like, you can go to a pet shelter and get a new one. That's sympathy, right? Empathy is, I really understand what you're feeling, even just connecting with that person's emotion and their feeling, it can do a lot for stress relief. Because what empathy essentially, I'm not going to go into it actually. I'm going to do that on that slide, the empathy slide. Yeah, but basically, I somewhat agree and disagree with people's approach, what you were asking. People can have a positive energy, it depends on the person, if they want to or not. So I hope that answered your question. Did that answer your question?
Though with a smile, like
Right.
he, that's you can't smile without having a good energy, and that's what helps us as well. I don't know if that is
Exactly. Yeah, it does, definitely. So smiling, doing kind acts for others, taking part in charitable organizations and charitable acts, these are all things with emitting a positive energy, doing things with a good heart, with not expecting return either, or reward or expectations. All right, so I'm just going to basically go into what we did last time. We did a stress assessment. Essentially, there was different factors where everybody had to write down a number next to the stress assessment to see if they were more likely to get a chronic stress-related illness. So there were numbers that related to, if, for example, if you experience a death in the family, there's a very high number related to that, versus if you experience financial stressors in the past year. So if you had 300 or above, then you were more likely to get a stress-related illness. If it was 150 or below, I think it was if it was 100 or below, you were less likely to get a stress-related illness. We also talked about the 3 kinds of stress: acute, eustress, and chronic stress. And we also talked about the biological and chemical factors of stress, as well as mindfulness, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, which you're going to see on the sheet that we passed out. Did everybody get a worksheet? And if we have anything, we have some more up there. I'm going to review that worksheet that I had printed out, the stress management tips. That's for you to take home. You can just review that with yourself. The mindfulness exercise, if you can turn to where it says the 5 senses on the back of the page. When it says this is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, what are 5 things you can see? What are 4 things you can feel? 3 things you can hear? 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This is a grounding and mindfulness exercise. This is for you all to keep. These are just different ways for you to become more mindful, and also mindful of your eating, mindful of your body scan, right? That's also very important, how you're feeling, and you can start from your head or you can start from your toes. Imagine feeling, how do my feet feel with the pressure of my feet on the floor? You become mindful. All right, now how do my legs feel? Is there any heat? Is there pressure? Is there tension? Do my legs hurt? Whatever is, if there's any pain in your body, you do a body scan. It's always good to continue doing that with deep breathing. mindfulness meditation. I also tied that in with Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how he used to meditate on, he used to do it on a daily basis, but his meditation that he used to do was retreat to the cave of Hira, right? So when he would retreat to the cave of Hira, that was not on a daily, but it was often. And when he would go there, that would essentially be his meditative point. Gratitude, he also he practiced on a daily basis, and he was always grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I went into what he used to eat, because health. A lot of people don't know this, but serotonin that's in your mind, serotonin is also affected in your gut. So the things that you do decide to put in your body, right, those are things that it can have an effect on your mental health. So if you're eating unhealthy foods and fatty foods and starches and carbs and whatnot, that's going to have an effect because serotonin is in your gut. Everybody thinks that serotonin is just in your mind. It's in your mind, but it's also in your gut. So your food does have a huge effect. So that's why it's always important why people say eat healthy, because healthy eating does have an effect on your mind and body, okay? And how you feel essentially. So these were just some things that you can take home with you. Inshallah, I hope that it helps with stress management. I also showed a video from Yaqeen Institute. You can always pull it up on YouTube if you type in mindfulness and Yaqeen Institute. I know Yaqeen Institute was here at IFSF last night. I don't know if anybody got to attend. I was not there, but if anybody got to attend, I'm sure it was amazing.
It was amazing.
So it's on Facebook, it's live streamed.
Yeah, so it's live streamed on Facebook. You can watch that. And yes, I highly encourage all of you. It's a 7-minute video by Yaqeen Institute on mindfulness in Islam. And it's amazing because there were some terms and some things in there I've never heard before, such as like muraqabah, which is what mindfulness is in Islam. And then we talked about, like I just mentioned, the prophetic tradition of stress relief. And we ended the session with a guided meditation. Since we have a lot of new faces today, if we have time, then I can do another guided meditation, the same one, with all of you. And if those people who were here last time, if that's okay with you to repeat that guided meditation, because a lot of people liked it. Do you all like it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe we can do that again for the newcomers, inshallah. I do have a progressive muscle relaxation for all of you, so that's something different for those who were here last time. So if after that, then maybe inshallah anytime we can do that. So basically I'm just going to start with the American Psychological Association. I have a lot of references by them, and a lot of my information comes from them. So it's called APA. If you ever want to sign up for their newsletters or find out more about Psychology Today is also very good, and you can find out more of these stress relief techniques and tips through those organizations. So the Center of Disease and Control found that 66% of Americans lie awake at night by the physical or emotional effects of stress, which has been linked to many health issues, such as obesity, heart disease, and stroke to name a few. And these factors help us determine stress and if it impacts us positively or negatively. So these are some of the things that I'm going to go through in terms of how you perceive your stress. So there's our perception of stress, right? If I can perceive something as stressful, I can perceive this, talking up here, as something very stressful for me. But for somebody else, like Sister Rabia, it may not be stressful for her. Because she does it all the time, you know? So her coming up here is probably not stressful. So it's our perception of stress, right? For me, I could be jittery, I could be nervous, my heart could be pounding, my palms could be sweaty, but it's my perception of stress. For her, she's like, okay, I just got to speak at 5 places today and then just go home, you know? It may not be something stressful for her. The meaning we attach to it, and our ability to cope with uncertainty and ambiguity, and the degree of control we have over circumstances to produce the stress. So I did talk about cortisol and DHEA last time and the chemical components of stress. So cortisol is the chemical that is released when your body is stressed, and DHEA is basically the chemical in your body that balances out cortisol. So when you do different stress relief techniques, the DHEA balances out and it decreases the cortisol in your body. So like we talked about foods, and we talked about stress relief activities, and we went into different kinds. Does anybody remember from who was here last week, what we talked about essentially, some of the things to release to decrease cortisol?
Last meeting.
Last time, yeah. Some of the things we talked about. Breathing, yes. We talked about oxytocin, right? Exercise and endorphins, right? So oxytocin is our happy chemical. Endorphins are also released. When I talked about eustress is a positive stress, right? So a lot of the times we get stressed out, there's chronic and acute stress, but eustress is the positive stress. For example, if you're working out at a gym, it's positive stress because you're putting stress on your body physically, but you're having a good reaction afterwards, right? Because it's releasing endorphins and oxytocin in your mind and in your body. It's not going to have any negative impact on you. So eustress is a good stress. Any questions so far? And if I'm going too fast, please let me know. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So I'm going to begin by talking about PTSD. I know, unfortunately, we had a horrific incident that happened 2 days ago in New Zealand, and it impacted Muslim communities all over the world. So as I talk about PTSD, there's post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's also a secondary traumatic stress that you can gain even if you weren't there, right? And that's essentially what we all experienced. When you experience, if anybody had watched the live videos, if anybody had seen pictures, if you had seen or watched, you know, a lot of the footage that was out, it can have a secondary trauma that you're getting from that stress. Does anybody know that you're losing sleep, you're scared to go to the masjid, you're scared to do things, you're scared to go outside, you're experiencing any kind of heart pounding, you're experiencing sweaty palms, you're experiencing any kind of symptoms of anxiety or stress?
Yes, in a way, yesterday it was crazy. I was driving and I saw a bunch of police cars coming down the strip, and I was like, oh my God, I was with my daughter, and my heart just said, I need to go stop at the school right now. Thank God, it was just an accident that happened, but just because of what I know what happened, that did do something. And I don't even watch the TV.
Right.
It was just from hearing that, look, there was a shooting that happened in New Zealand, and I saw police here earlier that day, you know, in the morning time. But it did, and I'm not on social media like that, and nor do I have a TV, but it did hit me in a way.
Right.
So, yeah.
So essentially it triggered you.
Yeah, it triggered.
And it triggered you in a negative way because something that may not have, you've seen a police car before, right? And you wouldn't have had that. You basically associated yourself with a negative memory. Even though you didn't experience it, a lot of people think that you can't get PTSD if I didn't directly experience the shooting. We didn't directly experience it. We weren't there, but we heard about it. We saw news about it. We saw articles and things like that. So that secondary stress can have an impact on our life, right?
Our children also, you know,
Our
I was a
children,
little nervous
exactly.
about when they were going to university yesterday. Maybe they'll face with some negativity,
Exactly.
or they'll say something regarding to the incident.
Yeah.
So a little nervous about it.
Yeah, I was going around and I was talking to the kids at the school yesterday, and a lot of them were more scared, which was very interesting to me. They were more scared when I had related that incident, like the scare that happened at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Their faces got shaken when I mentioned MSD, right? But they weren't as shaken or stirred up when they heard about New Zealand. Why? I guess because it was so far away, and MSD was right here. It hit hard and hit home for them because they identified as, I'm a student, I go to school, that can happen at my school. Versus, yes, we have dual identities, right? You also go to the masjid, you're a Muslim, you go to pray, you go for Jummah. But for them, it was very interesting to see that, and I picked up on how terrified the kids were more of a school shooting versus a mosque shooting. So it does impact kids, but I also think it also depends on the age level too, and the maturity level and whatnot as well. But it can impact them overall, like trauma. Some kids were saying, I'm scared now to go to the masjid. Like, what if somebody comes to the masjid? I'm scared. What do I do? Right? So essentially, we can't let the fear win. Because that's essentially what these people do, is when they do these kinds of acts of terror, they're instilling fear in us, and we can't let them win. So we continuously practice our religion, we continuously show our faith proudly, we should go more larger in numbers to scare us, we're scared of a look, you know?
Oh, that's
So
why I refuse to watch the video. I'm like,
Exactly.
I don't
I did watch
want- it's
the video.
disrespecting
Yeah.
the victims.
Right.
Plus, you know, why, I mean, our tawakkul is Allah, but of course, you know, why fulfilling the actual intention of the person, the shooter.
Yes,
So I
exactly.
just refuse to.
We're basically feeding into the hate that he wants us to feed into, you know?
Be scared.
If we were to get scared of the question. But, any questions so far? Because I'm gonna go into PTSD now. The AP, according to the American Psychological Association, PTSD is a psychiatric disorder that can occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event, such as a natural disaster, a serious accident, a terrorist act, a war, combat, rape, or other violent acts or personal assault. About 3.5% of the population in America has PTSD, and 1 in 11 people will be diagnosed with PTSD at one point in their lifetime. So number one, when they're diagnosed with PTSD, some of the things that they are diagnosed with is intrusive thoughts, if they experience intrusive thoughts, avoiding reminders, negative thoughts and feelings, and arousal and reactive symptoms regarding the traumatic event. So these are just the 4 criteria, and obviously there's more detail. I'm not going to go into the details of it because you can go into the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It's number 5 we have out right now, where you can read the details, how it's diagnosed. It's very lengthy. I just am briefly going over PTSD with all of you today, but this is where you can find out more information. Essentially, PTSD has to last for more than 1 month. If it lasts for more than a month, then you can be diagnosed. That's the diagnostic criteria for it. Now, for secondary traumatic stress, it typically lasts from 3 days up until 1 month, but it doesn't last past that. If it lasts past that, then and you're still getting pounding heart, you're getting anxiety, you can't go out, you're getting scared, you're getting all of these different kinds of feelings, you can't sleep at night, nightmares, all of these different kinds of symptoms, then you should definitely go to a doctor. You should let somebody know, go see a psychiatrist or a therapist regarding these feelings of negativity that you're feeling. So essentially, if it's lasting more than a month, definitely go seek help.
Natasha,
Yes.
would death come into there? Like we had a death in the family,
Uh-huh.
and it really affected my sleep. So would that also come into?
Grief is different than trauma, right? So grief and trauma can coincide together, but grief typically there's no time limit on grief. So if you're grieving for a family member, you have to go through the 6 stages of grief, right? And essentially you're going to, it can be 3 months for you, but it can be 1 year for another individual. So grief, essentially, if you were to even go see a therapist, psychiatrist, whatever, you can't put that timeline on it. There's no timeline for grief and loss. We do help you with coping skills regarding that, but it can't be versus trauma, because if you did experience a trauma and it resulted in the loss of somebody else, then that's something you probably do at PTSD, and you're coping along with the grief, right? The grief and loss of that individual. So these people who experienced the shooting, they lost, they're grieving, but they also experienced PTSD, right? Because in that secondary stress, that secondary traumatic stress that they've experienced, like the wives who lost their husbands or the children who lost their parents, most probably they have secondary traumatic stress that is going to lead into PTSD, because it's going to last longer than a month. It's going to haunt them, they're going to be scared. Those symptoms are going to prolong after 1 month. That is why for them it'd be PTSD along with grief. Is that clear, Benny? Yeah. Okay. All right, and so that's PTSD. Now before I go into stress and age, a different topic for stress, does anybody have any questions regarding secondary trauma and PTSD? Okay, so I wanted to briefly touch on stress and age, right? We have different stress that impacts us. And who in here is a mother who has children? Okay, so about like half of the room. Okay. So anybody who have teenagers?
Yeah.
Or has their teenagers are no longer teenagers, or all right, almost there. Categories. Okay. Everybody. Can I get the hands again who has teenagers or who has been through teenage years with their kids?
I'm raising 3 fingers to represent.
Okay, so do you understand essentially some of the things that teenagers experience, like stress? Do you think teenagers get stressed?
Yes.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the things that stresses teenagers out?
Homework,
Homework?
exams,
Yes.
Peer pressure,
expectations.
Next to teenagers.
What is it?
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure? Expectations?
Their
Teenager,
father.
would you like to?
Their mom's really cool.
If they're
What are
goal
some things
oriented,
that
yeah.
stress teenagers out?
I mean, they got a lot covered: exams, homework, peer pressure,
A lot.
expectations, maybe friendships, like friendships that are gained or lost, surrounding environments in the community. All that can affect them.
What about self-identity?
Oh yeah, that's huge.
Right? So self-identity is a really big thing what teenagers also experience along with all of those factors. But essentially, we have to understand that our teenager, why they're acting out or why they're aggressive or why they're rude or why they're disrespectful. Obviously, there's no reason to be disrespectful or rude, but we have to always understand the underlying factors that they're experiencing. At that age, their body is changing. They are hormonal. They are confused. They're trying to fit in along with trying to figure out who they are as a person. They're trying to figure out their life ahead of them. Trying to see if I'm going to get into college or what am I going to do and what is my career going to be like. Who am I as a person? Like, what do I like? What are my dislikes? So all of these things add factors, and these are all factors that add stress to a teenager's life, right? So this age gap is obviously the teen years, 13 to 19 years of age. Anybody want to give any input regarding your teenagers and what you experienced during that time? Was it very tough versus the young adult years from 20 to 29?
I'll go with that.
So the 20 to 29 is also very tough? Okay. So I want the moms to kind of give some input.
I think not as tough as the teenagers are. Because once they hit 20, I've seen my older one so she is much mature. She knows what she has to do. She's more of a leader. My son is, he's a follower type. But I'm glad that he made good friends. So that's what I've noticed also, that if they make good friends, alhamdulillah, beside what your upbringings are, and we as a Muslim, they go through cultural clashes too.
Right.
So they have to fit in for the society, and then they have the norms for what to do and what not to do as a Muslim also. So if they have good friends, alhamdulillah, I would say I'm blessed with that they have good friends. So then they know the right proper direction. So their fun is different than the fun for the other teenagers. But I've seen that the older ones, once they hit 21, the maturity level has gone much deeper, much better, compared to the 13 to the 19 one.
Right.
This is my personal experience.
Does anybody else agree? Their maturity level changes and friendships, who they surround themselves by. Yes.
All that changes
Yeah.
over the course of years, anyway, As they grow older, it doesn't stay stagnant.
Right.
It moves on, and they change.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you guys some statistics regarding teenagers and stress. Specifically why I'm giving you guys on teenagers and children, because last time when we got the survey back, a lot of the moms had requested that kind of topic regarding talking about their kids and understanding what their kids are going through, right? So I kind of somewhat incorporated that. That could be a whole workshop on its own, but I somewhat incorporated that into here so you can understand some of the stress factors that your teenagers are going through. And if you don't have teenagers yet, or you do plan on having children, or if you don't have them yet and they're toddlers, this is something you're going to go through because teenagers are very, very tough years. Teenagers have an unhealthy level of stress due to school. Getting into college or figuring out what to do after high school is the primary source of stress for teenagers. According to the American Psychological Association, the data collected for teens in 2014, 83% of them reported they were stressed about school, getting into college, and after high school plans. 69% 29% of them were concerned about their parents' financial concerns for them and their family, and 35% of them report lying awake at night, overeating unhealthy foods, skipping meals due to stress. 40% of them report feeling irritable or angry, and 36% of them report feeling nervous and anxious, fatigued or tired, and they averaged a 5.8 stress level out of a 10-point stress level. So that shows that teenagers are in the middle, even though it's 5.8, it's almost 6. It's still very high for a teenager, right? They're still children, technically, and they're experiencing that high of a stress level, so we have to understand some of their changes. How your teen may express their stress is through emotional stress by appearing agitated, anxious, or depressed, so you have to definitely pay attention to their behavior. If there's any physical changes, including changes in eating, if they're overeating or undereating, skipping meals, sleeping habits, they're oversleeping and they're skipping classes or they're not sleeping at all, avoidance of normal daily activities, behavioral changes, so look for changes in eating, sleeping, and avoidance of daily habits, and cognitive changes, decreased concentration, forgetfulness, or the appearance of carelessness. So now as we go on to young adult years, what are some of those stressors? I'm currently in that category right now. So what are some stressors that we go in? And I have some friends here too who are in that category. So I'm going to call on them. What are some stressors that you experienced during the young adult years?
Basically, like work-life balance. That's primarily one of the biggest stressors.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree too. Like work-life balance, trying to understand like what you like about your work, what you don't like, trying to figure that part out.
So essentially during the young adult years, we're trying to figure out, we're trying to have that ideal situation of we have to get married, we have to have a home when we want to start a family. Those are mainly the primary concerns during the young adult years of getting your life started, right? Of this ideal image of what a life should be. Getting our careers, like basically skyrocket our careers, grow in our careers, finish our education, get married and settle down. Those are all the primary concerns and stress factors during the young adult years. The parenting years, 29 to 50 years of age, those are all different kinds of stress, right? Because now you've essentially, during that time, you're trying to get yourself ready, have a home, start a family, have children. This is typically, it's not that everybody goes through this, but this is typically what people focus on during those years. And then you're trying to figure out your children's life, take care of them, financial concerns, right? And that's a big stressor for a lot of families during the parenting years, because you not only have stressors for your family, but you have stressors for your kids, right? You have to take care of your kids, you have to send them off to school if you want them to get a good education, college, all of these things, right? So anybody who wants to kind of give input regarding the parenting years and some stress factors related to them?
You said it.
Okay. Those are the okay. Health factors are also during the parenting years because as you get older, typically after 40 or so, your health starts to change, right? And health factors begin to take more of a priority, and you begin to get more stressed out. Inshallah, you don't get any kind of illness, but typically illnesses and things like that and body changes tend to happen after 40 years of age. Now there's midlife crisis, there's menopause, there's retirement, there's 50 years and older, right? These are all big stress factors. Why I'm mentioning these factors, because we're all women in here. Midlife crisis, I haven't been through there, but if anybody wants to kind of share how that is, but it's typically stressful, right? Because you're essentially trying to see if you've met your needs, that you kind of, you've met your goals, right? When you're in that age factor, you're seeing, what did I do with my life? Did I do what I wanted to accomplish? Did I do what I set my goals out to be? Is this how I wanted my life to be when I'm at this age? When I'm in my 50s, is this how I imagined it? When I was 20 or so, or 18, is this how I imagined my life to be? And it can essentially, a person can drift off into depression due to that. Because midlife crisis can have that effect because you have these unmet expectations in your mind, right? And essentially that's what the midlife crisis consists of all these confusing factors and these expectations that you put yourself up to. Instead of just being grateful with the here and the now and how your life has taken turns and the different course that your life has taken.
Natasha, as a woman raised here,
Yeah.
you know there's expectations put on us to have it all, like to be the perfect mother and to be a career woman. And then like I'm going to be 50 this year, so I raised my family. But I do feel like, people always ask me what do you do for a living. So it is like exactly what you're saying. Like maybe I should have taken a career and raised children at the same time.
Right.
So
It's that expectation that you had of
exactly.
yourself. And then you typically can get disappointed in yourself and cause unnecessary stress on yourself when you can't go back into the past, right? You can't change the past, but what you do have control over is the here and the now, the right now. So essentially, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with your future? Are you going to make that change? Are you going to go for that goal that you always wanted to be? If you wanted to be a doctor, are you going to go to medical school when you're 50 years old? You're 50 years old? Go ahead. I mean, if that's what you want, go ahead, but there's nobody else stopping you. You have essentially the control. That stress that you're causing upon yourself is what you have to do, that self-reflection with yourself.
I have two questions, Natasha.
Realistic, exactly, yeah. We don't want to be unrealistic, but if that's something that's causing you a lot of stress and you feel unhappy and unmet with your needs and you want to go back to medical school at 50 years of age, then that's you, it's your decision.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
The first one that you just mentioned regarding our kids growing older, right?
Right.
I mean, we know, and I guess, like I have learned with my ages, beside whatever the educations and whatever experiences, career, if they have like a goal, career, like if they have mind. So how do we, share or maybe guide them in order to de-stress them? That's number one. Sometimes we give them advices, how helpful it is, because sometimes it says that you need to know what to say at the right time, the right moment, and what to say, who to say, right? So there's certain things that I continuously remind myself. That is the first question. Second question is, I go through the same phase. That's what just the Sabahat said, that sometimes people would ask me, that what you do for a living. I don't have that stress that why I didn't do what I should have done. But what made us that is that the pressure from the society, because you've seen some of the career-oriented women, which I think that I could be too, or it's just the norm of today's society that in order to present yourself, you have to be a career-oriented, because like what I saw 20 years ago in myself, I wanted to do a lot of missionary, voluntarily, a lot of other things that I still have in my mind. And I started doing that in the past few years. Kids are older now. I used to be involved in schools, and so now I have added more to it, right? So I'm quite content with what I do now. But yeah, sometimes I want to, like proceed into like, should I go back to the education? But then I would sit down and say, is it worth enough to put yourself into that kind of stress where you don't have time? Like right now, we make our own time. Those who are blessed, with home and don't work professionally, they can manage their times well and can be at different places. Unlike those who have a work schedule, so they are bound to it. So if you can, maybe at the end or something, I don't know if it was like I elaborated too much, but have like a light on these two questions too.
The first question, I had a response in my head, but then I focused on the second question. What was the first question again?
Like how should we direct our kids, whether it's teenagers, like going through 17, like mine is 20 now, but that age to a 24-year-old, how you can help them with study stress, with something happened between the friends, or with
so
don't have much.
Essentially, some stress too we didn't focus on. Typically in like Desi culture, these kinds of things, we also feed into our children for a career that we may have wanted.
Sure.
Right? So for example, if you wanted to be a doctor and you never got to have that opportunity, and you're pushing your child that you have to go to medical school or you have to be a lawyer or a doctor. These are your two options, you know, or an engineer or whatever it is. 3 options for you, pick one, right? And if you're not that, then you're a failure or you're, you know, these kinds of things. A lot of the times in the culture, alhamdulillah, my parents never put that stress on me or on my siblings where we had to go into a certain career, a certain field. Henceforth, why I'm in this field today. This is not a field that you see a lot of Muslim people going in, right? But alhamdulillah, I'm so thankful that I never had that kind of pressure, that stress on me as to you have to go into this field, you have to go into that field. But unfortunately, that's why we have to always check ourselves, and we have to check if you have unmet needs within yourself and you didn't go into this kind of career, why I'm saying that is you have to make sure you have to stop yourself at the door before you bring that unmet need into your child, because a lot of the time that happens, right? And parents are doing that a lot today, and the kids have so much pressure on them. So first of all, that's the first thing I want to do, just address, because that is something in our communities that is happening a lot. Secondly, going into how to guide your child, right? Like, I'm always going to relate it personally. I was always open. I always had an open relationship with my parents. If I had a question, they were my friends. I was always able to, they were my parent, there was obviously discipline, but they were my friends in a sense where I can talk openly with them. There's always that balance. Don't be your child's enemy. Don't be somebody whom your child is scared to talk to. Because if your child is scared to talk to you, they're not going to come to you with their issues or their problems. They're not going to come to you and tell you, look, I don't think I can fulfill this need of becoming a doctor, and I'm sorry, but I really want to be a veterinarian. And I know that that may be not a job that's accepted, or it may not be a job that's something that, but I really love animals, and I really want to become a vet. But that's something that is an open discussion between a parent and a child. That will essentially relieve that child's stress, and it will relieve your stress that you're feeling for your child. So it has that adverse reaction on each other, but it begins with that connection, building that connection, communication, and that's something that we tend to have an issue in all of, whether it's your child, whether it's your husband, whether it's a wife, whether it's an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a friend. Communication issue is the core of our issues, because if we were to fix communicating our needs in a healthy, balanced way, and not without being aggressive or passive aggressive, but being assertive and letting our needs being known, a lot of issues would not be existing. Do you agree or disagree?
I do agree.
Right? So these are also things to help address it, and I hope that addresses your question.
No, it does, because
Yeah.
you know, like, I have a very open communication, but
Right.
sometimes, you know what, like, I wanted to know that, you know, how far can you go? But yes,
Right.
that's a
Yeah,
whole lot.
just you can ask your child how far can I go. Let them set the tone, set the boundary with them. They say, Mom, I just really don't want to talk to you about that. You know, give them your life experiences. What I find typically with my clients when they open up, and I know obviously a parent and child relationship is different than a therapist and client relationship. But when I find that a child is very closed up with me and they don't want to talk about it, I start talking about myself. I give them a little bit more of myself for them to understand that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and I'm here to help you, right? Your parent is not your enemy, but you have to have that discussion with your child. Look, I made this mistake in my life, and I don't want you to make that same mistake. But sometimes it's okay for your child to make mistakes. We also have to come to terms with that, because they won't learn as much as you tell them, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. They have to learn in their own experience. So that's another thing that we have to also understand in that level, and that bond, and that relationship with our children. Even though I'm not a mother, but you know, my experience with kids. And any other questions? Did I answer your second question? What was your second question?
That
Yeah.
pressure from the society, you know
Right.
what, for being a career-oriented, has to, must have. I mean, there are so many women who are not maybe professionally very elevated, but they're, mashallah, doing very well within the community.
Right.
You know, and then there are some more balanced, doing outside work also, have education, and still managing very well also. But yeah, this is what I've noticed very much. You know, in
Maybe
the
I'll
past-
answer that one at the end. Oh,
It's a long discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one.
Like-
Yes.
If you're having a conversation
and it tries to go in like in a stressful way or an argument, how do you deal with that?
If you have stress in an
How
argument,
you're having a conversation with your child and your husband, and it goes into an argument. How do you?
how does your currently how does your family deal with it? Do you yell during the situation? Do you isolate? Do you cry? What are you typically doing as your coping skill during that situation, during a conflict?
I started
Or all of
yelling
the above.
sometimes.
Huh? Yell. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Would start
essentially,
talking.
right. So essentially, we always want to try the opposite because you've been doing that, it's not working. So you want to do something where you have an open-minded discussion. You have to breathe first, okay? Take a moment to yourself and figure out, why am I getting upset during the situation? What is the issue? And let's talk like adults. Let's try to hash out this issue, but listening. Listening is a very simple thing in communication, but we tend not to do that. We half listen, and we're listening for a response. We're listening to respond typically, right? So if you're telling me something and I'm just listening to you and I'm waiting for my response and I'm building up my anger and I'm building up my response, I'm not really listening to your needs, right? So that's something that you have to do. If you're upset, you say, okay, tell me what made you upset during the situation. What can I do to help you? What can I do to change the situation? What can I do to help make you less angry? Listen to that person. If they say, I hate how you always wake me up at 5 a.m. in the morning, every morning, and you yell in my ear, I hate it. Mom, can you just stop doing that, right? Okay, what can I do to change? Can I get you an alarm clock so that you wake up on your own? Would you like that? Yeah, I very much like that. Okay, let's go to Walmart and get an alarm clock. Come to a compromise,
Walmart doesn't
right?
sell it anymore.
Because we have the telephone. Our phone has it.
Or on your phone, everything's on your phone technology now, right? So these are things where you can, because a lot of the times, like I said, we're always listening to respond. We have to take a step back and say, am I wrong in this situation? Self-accountability is really big.
What
And we
if the
say,
other person starts yelling? You're not yelling.
then don't yell. Because if you're gonna yell, and this is what I tell my kids too, about bullying, right? If I call you a mean name and you call me a mean name, and I call you a mean name and you call me a mean name back, and we're teasing each other, it can get physical, it can get aggressive, and we can really hurt each other's feelings with our words, right? But if you call me a mean name and I said, okay, that's your opinion, that's it, would you continue to bully me? No. That's the same thing in passive-aggressive conversations, aggressive conversation, in communication where somebody is yelling, the tension is only going to rise higher if you yell back. So you take a moment, and how I diffuse situations, whether it's in relationships or in families or whatever, take a breather. Sometimes it's hard because somebody may really trigger you. I typically walk away from a situation when I'm upset, okay? And if you need to walk away, you say, I need 5 minutes to myself, or I need to be by myself, let that person know. Don't be disrespectful about it or whatever. Say, let's take a moment to breathe and let's come back and reconvene and talk about the situation. If that's going to make that person even more upset, breathe with them. Do something that's going to make them less upset, right? Just tell them to relax. Because sometimes when somebody's in that mode, you have to give them some time to come back down. You don't want to go back, you don't want to get higher and then yell back and then it just gets mumble jumbled, you know? Does that help in any way?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. It's always, we always have to take time for ourselves and check our actions and our emotions too. How we're feeling in the situation. Boundary setting. So why is that related to stress management? A lot of the times we put stress on ourselves when we don't set boundaries, right? And we can be yes mans basically. Oh, can you come on the weekend? Can you come do this for me? Sure. Can you also come over the week and I need you to do this for me? Can you pick this up? Can you go here? Can you go there? And you typically just keep saying yes and yes and yes to people's needs, but you know you're neglecting yourself. You're essentially putting unnecessary stress on yourself. Does that happen to anybody? Yeah. Okay. I want to see hands. Who does not know how to set boundaries? Okay. Sometimes I do too. Sometimes we don't know how to set boundaries, right?
You know? I mean, you feel bad, okay?
So typically, there's 3 ways of and certain individuals. Maybe we feel guilty. I feel guilty when I say no to my mom. Okay? Like I feel guilty saying no to her, right? Because it's like, that's your mom. If that happens with anybody, do you feel guilty for a certain individual and maybe a certain individual in your life when you just say no? But sometimes we have to be able to set boundaries with even those closest people to you, the ones who are near and dear to your heart, because then you're adding unnecessary stress to yourself. Saying no is difficult because of the guilt it brings, but we feeling things will fall apart or we are not doing enough without our personal involvement. So we feel obligated to provide an answer and justify a reason for us to say no. So if Amada invites me for lunch and I'm like, no Amada, I just can't make it tomorrow. Boundary set. No should be enough. But if I feel guilty, so Amada, like tomorrow I'm going to Orlando and I have to do all this. She's not gonna even want to hear it. She's gonna be like, okay, like why is she telling me all of this? Like some people really, and what I've come across, some people don't care. They're just like, okay, no is enough. Like why are you sharing your whole life details with me? But it's that guilt that we feel inside of us. It's not the other person, it's us. So we have to reevaluate, why do we feel guilty when we say no to individuals? No is not rude. It depends on how you say it, how you come across. If Amada's like, hey, can you get me some tea? And I'm like, no. Then that's rude. If I'm just like, oh no, I'm sorry, I really can't right now. I'm a little busy. But, just like, okay. It's also our tone of voice, how we communicate. All of these things play a factor in saying boundary setting. Learning to say no and letting it hang out there is its own glory and a small kind of superpower. So it's kind of nice to have that. Yes?
Should we be apologizing while saying no? Like, no, I'm sorry.
That's also within you. Why are you apologizing?
You right now you just give an example.
Right.
I tend to give that sometimes. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't.
But did the person do anything?
No, because it's trying to create that, I guess, that space where you're showing.
But you're
that you
feeling
care.
guilty.
Exactly.
You're feeling guilty within yourself. So you're feeling the need that you.
Not really guilty. Sometimes the relation is that you have to explain why you are saying.
Right. It obviously depends on the situation. But if some people typically say it all the time, right? And I know, is that you? Do you usually say, I'm sorry, no, I can't?
Sometimes
They usually say
gets
they're
out.
no. Yeah.
Saying no.
Yeah. Because you don't really typically have to apologize every time you say no.
Right.
But some people, for example, yes, if you say, I apologize, I can't because of this, maybe it's a death in a family, you really can't, that's appropriate to say, I apologize, I'm sorry for that. But if every time you say no, you're setting a boundary with an apologetic, apologizing, there's no need for that. No should be said no. Obviously, if you don't want to be rude, then that's a different thing. It depends on the situation, depends on the person. But apologizing does not need to be said. It doesn't need to be there to say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Right.
There's no need for that. But I hope
You said it loses
yes.
meaning after a while. You are apologizing.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to kind of stop yourself from saying, like, why am I saying sorry? And I'm that type of person, I say I'm sorry a lot. I always say it. I'm like, I'm sorry. I can't. Even just, I think Svatati today, I was like, I'm so sorry I'm late. I was feeling sick and this is happening and then, my bathroom and blah, 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 blah. There's a guy fixing it. And she's probably like, why is what's going on? But I was just filling her ears with all of this stuff and she was setting up that I was doing that. And that's typically, why do I have to do that? Why do I have to apologize? Why couldn't I just say, I'm apologizing for being late. That's what I'm apologizing for. But
one tip I read was, when you are late, instead of saying I'm sorry for being late, you can change it and say thank you for waiting.
Exactly. There's different ways to say it. You can say thank you for being patient while I was away. Thank you for this. When you turn it into, instead of apologizing or a guilty kind of form, you turn it into something positive, like thanking that person. Then you're shifting the tone of the conversation. Right? So, yeah. 3 ways, yes.
I have a question. Sometimes, the parents also say to the kids, no, I'm not going to give you this or what. I mean, how they talk with the kids, if the kids really need those things. type of kids. If the parent says no, no all the time, he's not a friend with the parent. He's the enemy now. He's only 10 years or 11, you know, and he always complaining, my parents say everything, no, no, no.
So you know how to change that? Instead of
Yeah,
saying
this is not
no,
for personal,
yeah.
but I'm asking.
Oh, for somebody else.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, if a child asks, can I have this kind of food after school? Can I have macaroni and cheese after school? And you say, no, you can't. You already ate macaroni and cheese yesterday after school, right? And you say it like that. If you say, today we're gonna have chicken, but maybe over the weekend we can eat macaroni and cheese. That compromise, and that way you're not saying no. You are saying no indirectly. You're not saying no completely to that child. You're making a compromise with them, a deal with them. You're saying, I hear your needs. I hear what you need and I hear what you want, but this is what we're going to do about it because I'm going to make it up to you like this. Maybe if a child says, I want this toy or I want this video game, and you say, no, 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 it's so expensive, you say, how about if you get straight A's on your report card? We'll think about you, me and you will go to Walmart and we'll get that video game for you. That compromise is how you need to set the tone with that child. Because if they're constantly, my mom always says no, they'll say, oh, I'll work hard then. You're giving them an incentive to work hard, get straight A's, and then I'll get that video game.
But then
right?
the next question for the child, I'm asking you.
Then, the child question, if it says, the child says, look, I got straight A's on my report card, and you didn't buy me the video game, then you tell the child something else. You tell the child, well, right now I don't have the money to buy that game, but maybe together we can save money together to buy you that game. Do something creative with that child to understand, so the child understands, oh, okay, mom doesn't have the money right now to buy me that expensive game, but she's making a compromise with me. We're going to put $1 in the jar every day so we can save up for your video game. Their questions are gonna stop, but you have to have an answer some way of compromise for their answer, for their questions.
I mean, age appropriate. That's what I've played always,
Exactly.
You're young for this.
So 3 ways to say no is by saying the words I can't for so and so reason. 2 degrees of departure would be saying I'll get back to you. That way you buy yourself enough time. If you need to decline, you have enough time to decline that invitation or that request. And by saying something else, by creating an alternative. For example, if somebody says, can you bring a dish to that party? And I say, no, I can't bring a dish to the party, but I can help out with the games. Doing something that you're willing to do. Practicing empathy. I have a video. How are we doing on times?
It's 3:20 because it's been an hour.
We're behind? Oh, okay. So I have should I skip the video and do the exercise?
How long is the video?
The video is 3 minutes, and then I have the progressive muscle relaxation.
Okay, so we can do both.
Do the video. Yeah. All right, so we're going to talk about empathy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and communicating that. Empathy.
Is it playing twice?
So what is empathy? And why is it very different than sympathy? Is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space where someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." I have it, yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think our marriages fall apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. Things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So, essentially, what did you guys learn about empathy? And do you practice empathy on a daily basis?
Actually, we are so used to sympathetic phrases, you know.
Right.
So you need to practice empathy.
Yes, exactly. So when we give empathy, we're releasing the powerful chemical, the happy magical chemical we were talking about, the neurotransmitter of oxytocin, right? Because empathy, it creates a sense of trust and cooperation, which are keys to negotiation and resolving conflicts, whether it's between couples or even in communities or with friends, whatever it is. Leading with empathy can help reduce interpersonal conflict. We listen half-eared usually, preoccupied and not fully present in the moment. We listen with bias, with judgment. We get distracted by the noise of our internal voices, by second-guessing one another, which keeps us from really listening to others. Empathetic listening requires us to give up the self-centered view that the world is to focus on us, and by paying attention and connect with the other person's emotions. Reflect what others say to you by repeating or rephrasing, and emphasize feelings behind the words like, you sound exhausted. Is there something bothering you at work? Or pay attention to their body language by saying, you look tense. What can I do to help? Ask open-ended questions. How was your day at the office? Not, why are you late? Slow down and take a deep breath, especially if your buttons are getting pressed. Avoid snappy judgments and learn from the past and your past judgments and biases. Okay? So that's just a little bit on empathy, and we're going to now just do our breathing. Essentially, yes.
About empathy, a lot of people, when you talk to them and you expect empathy, they give you advice. Like, next time, don't do this, do that, do it like this, which
Right.
doesn't help.
That's their personal
Which,
judgment and bias.
I think more men do this than women. They are like solution focused. Like, if you're talking about this is how I see it. You should do this like this so you don't get into this situation.
Because that's
which
their
doesn't help
personal
at all.
judgment, right? And their personal bias. But that's not being empathetic. They're not really listening to what you're saying. They're half-eared listening. So if they're listening, if they really listened to you and they took the time out to hear and process your feelings, they wouldn't be coming out with these judgments and biases. But that's typically, sometimes we don't even catch ourselves doing it. You're like, next time you see the mistake you made, next time don't do that. Don't you think the person has already thought that in their head? You don't need to say it. But essentially you're making the person feel bad too. You're not being empathetic to the person's feelings.
I have a question. So if your children become masters of pushing your buttons,
Not this one.
what do you do?
Okay.
Actually, I'm trying to win a partner.
So give me an example for example. What are they doing that's pushing your buttons? How they're with you, maybe?
For example,
when she's working, the boys have a tendency to distract her from her work, her very important work, by like, you know, rubbing their hands all over her. You know, like they physically distract her, and then because she's so focused on her work and she considers it so important, it presses her butt. And they do it all the time.
Do you verbalize how much it bothers you?
Oh yeah.
Okay, but is it in what kind of tone of voice
Most
are
of
you?
the times I just don't hear it.
So you've chosen to ignore or chosen to get upset back with them, correct? So ignore. Okay. But
To live with them, you know what I mean?
So instead, a way to kind of approach that situation is to tell them, look, right now I would love to play and mess around and have fun and we joke and we do that, but at a later time. Right now I really have a deadline and I have to get this done. Do you prioritize your needs and your wants to them and let them know how important what you're doing is? Because they may not know how important it is to you. Or do they?
You know what? I'm going to hire you.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe Amada could express that too, to kind of be your voice in that moment and be like, look, not right now, Mom is, busy. Because if you take part in it and we laugh and we joke and we smile, we're kind of opening the door for those people. They think it's a joke. So they think that it's okay to do it. But if we set the tone in a kind and empathetic, nice way where we say, look, in 20 minutes I'll be done with this, then we can joke around and we'll eat ice cream together.
Then you can begin your nonsense.
Exactly. Then you can begin your nonsense. Yeah, exactly. So you set that boundary, So, all right, perfect. So the 4-3-4 that we were. Oh, what happened to my tape? I don't know what this is. Oh, okay. So breathing. This is the 4-3-4. On the count of 4, we breathe in, we hold for 3 seconds, and we breathe out. Okay. So this is the breathing that we're going to be doing as I do the progressive muscle relaxation. And I just want to ask, do you guys want to do progressive muscle relaxation or the guided meditation? The guided meditation. Anybody else? Progressive muscle? Those who were here last time did not experience the progressive muscle relaxation.
I was going to ask.
I would like to do
I wasn't here.
progressive muscle.
Okay, so all for progressive muscle relaxation, please raise your hand. Okay, all for guided meditation. Okay.
Well, I wasn't here, so I would raise for both.
Democracy or something.
Yeah, exactly. I would raise for both.
So what we are going to do is I would like everyone to sit comfortably in their seat. Please have the drop your feet also want you to
Yeah.
Oh, you ready for it? Okay. All right, so. Please take 3 deep breaths. So I'm going to count on the count of 4. We're going to do 3 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and release. 4, 3, 2, 1. One more deep breath in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and release. 4, 3, 2, 1. One last one. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. I want you to clear your mind of any stressors or anything that you have on your mind currently. And I want you to think of 3 things you're grateful for. Bring those things to the forefront of your mind. Has everybody brought those things they're grateful for? So I want you to now sit back in a comfortable position. Close your eyes. Last time I asked everyone to close their eyes, and not everybody had their eyes closed. I'd like everyone to close their eyes. Begin by taking a deep breath in and notice the feeling of the air filling your lungs. Hold your breath for a few seconds. Release the breath slowly and let the tension leave your body. Take in another deep breath and hold it. Again, slowly release the air. Now even slower, take another deep breath. Fill your lungs and hold the air. Slowly release the breath and imagine the feeling of tension leaving your body. Now move your attention to your feet. Begin to tense your feet by curling your toes in the arch of your foot. Hold on to the tension and notice what it feels like. Release the tension in your foot. Notice the new feeling of relaxation. Next, begin to focus on your lower leg. Tense the muscles in your calves. Hold them tightly and pay attention to the feeling of tension. Release the tension from your lower legs. Again, notice the feeling of relaxation. Remember to continue taking deep breaths. Next, tense the muscles of your upper leg and pelvis. You can do this by tightly squeezing your thighs together. Make sure you feel tenseness without going to the point of strain. And release. Feel the tension leave your muscles. Begin to tense your stomach and chest. You can do this by sucking your stomach in. Squeeze hard and hold the tension a little bit longer. Release the tension. Allow your body to go limp. Let yourself notice the feeling of relaxation. Continue taking deep breaths. Breathe in slowly, noticing the air fill your lungs, and hold it. Release the air slowly. Feel it leaving your lungs. Next, tense the muscles in your back by bringing your shoulders together behind you. Hold them tightly. Tense them as hard as you can without straining and keep holding. Release the tension from your back. Feel the tension slowly leaving your body and the feeling of relaxation. Notice how different your body feels when you allow it to relax. Tense your arms all the way from your hands to your shoulders by making a fist and squeezing all the way up to your arm. Hold it. Release the tension from your arms and shoulders. Notice the feeling of relaxation in your fingers, hands, arms and shoulders. Notice how your arms feel limp and at ease. Move up to your neck and your head. Tense your face and your neck by distorting the muscles around your eyes and mouth. Release the tension. Again, notice the new feeling of relaxation. Finally, tense your entire body. Your feet, your legs, your stomach, chest, arms, head and neck. Tense harder without straining and hold the tension. Now release. Allow your whole body to go limp. Pay attention to the feeling of relaxation and how different it is from the feeling of tension. Begin to wake your body up by slowly moving your muscles against your arms and legs. Stretch your muscles and open your eyes when you're ready. So how was that for everyone? Do you feel relaxed in your body? Muscle tension gone? Did it not work for anybody? Didn't work? Okay. It was harder for you to do because of pain-wise? Yeah? Okay. Did anybody else? It didn't work for you? It was harder to do? Kind of? Okay. Yeah, so essentially if you're by yourself, you just, a lot of the times if you're angry too, they say you make a fist, really strong, strong fist. And then you slowly release that tension. It helps let that anger go. So you do deep breaths. You can release the anger by making fists and letting it go. You think of the anger, hold it in your fist, think of what's making you angry, and constantly let it go. It's also a way of releasing tension. So this was progressive muscle relaxation. I don't know if we have time for guided meditation or not, or we, let's just do guided meditation. How long did it take last year? It wasn't that long. 5 minutes? Yeah, the guided meditation. Remember the safe place?
Oh.
Okay. So then no guided meditation. Okay, so after, maybe if we have time after Sister Rabia, we can do the guided meditation if you all are still here afterwards. So this is just the Charlie Brown quote as we end. The smile on my face doesn't mean my life is perfect. It means I appreciate what I have and what I have been blessed with, and I choose to be happy. And this is my contact. And so you can contact me at Haroon@nhs.net. Inshallah, I also personally request if people don't add me on social media networks. If you do see me, I personally like to keep things professional. Even though we're in the same community, you can add me on LinkedIn, and you can email me at this number. If you need to contact me, I don't know if you want to take down my work number. Does anybody need my work number? Yeah? It's 954-861-0169. So if you need to contact me for anything or resources-wise, you may contact me then.
Can you repeat it one more time?
Sorry?
Can you repeat your number one more time?
954-861-0169.
Okay, you said if someone wants to contact you, they have to go through the
Exactly, through the program. I currently don't do individual counseling. I can do it, but right now under my supervisor, I essentially prefer not to.
I know people
individual
have asked me, but I mean, it's good to have a counselor.
Yes, exactly. They would have to go through the memorial program in order for me to do the counseling.
So that's only for teenagers?
Yes, from ages babies to 17 years of age. If you have anybody in the home that age, I can also do counseling as I'm in the home with parent or family member.
What is the requirements to do that?
The requirement, you just contact me and you say, I just want counseling for my child or a family member. And if it's in the same home, we can get you a referral form. And I can get you in right now. I currently have a waiting list, but I can get you in some. It's a 12-week program, and you have to abide by the program requirements, which is I would have to meet with the child and the family once a week for a session. Okay? Do you need this? Okay, so.
Thank you very much.
Mashallah, this was so good. It seems like there's no need for anything else. But so, do we have 10 minutes, Sabahat?
Yeah, we have until say 4 o'clock.
Okay, anyway, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So, I told Natasha that I'm a good note taker, but I think she provided us the notes, so I didn't take notes. But I did. I still did take a couple of notes. So I'm going to start with Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Few questions that grabbed my attention. Number one, on positive energy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created human beings in such a way that there is no creation that matches human beings. And we have so much untapped potential that most of the times we don't even know we have it. And even when we practice it, we don't realize until someone tells us. Because we don't know. And we are not all knowing. So I'm going to give you an example of that everybody has positive energy. And it's just so beautiful to experience it and to be present and in that moment. So I hope, Arjun, you don't mind me bringing your name in. So last week, I was looking for beads, and I couldn't find them for the life of me in any store. And I'm going in the store with this tubular vision. I bought some and I put them on convection bake and the air dried them out. So they were no good for me. So I'm looking for beads. I walk in the store and I know a lot of people complain about me that I'm just going like this. I don't see to my right or left. I'm looking at that. All of a sudden, I just hear Assalamu alaikum, Rabia Khan. And I look up and it's beautiful Arjumat, mashallah. and she, I don't know how much distance was there between me and her. Of course, there was enough distance that I didn't see her at all. Or maybe there was no distance. I still don't know. I don't know anything. I was just looking for beads. And she made my day. I didn't find the beads, but she made my day. Just her greeting. So we do all have a lot of positive energy, and sharing it doesn't cost us much. It doesn't cost much, but it made my day. I did find beads later on. So sometimes it's just like that. I remember a long time ago I shared a book of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani. The title was The Keys to the Unseen. And I talked about the book. I gave the author's name, hoping that someone will read it. Usually, someone would read it, or I hope so. So Alia Sajidina came to me last week and she said, Rabia Baji, you gave the name of this book and I actually read it and it was such a beautiful thing for me to read it because it did become my mentor. And he remembered the translator's name and he remembered everything. So that made my day, right? Maybe 10 years ago I shared something with her, but she remembered it, right? She was talking to you, right?
Yeah.
She was talking to you that you should read it too.
Yeah, she sent me the picture of the book.
She said, do you know the translator's name?
Yeah.
Let me test you now.
Oh, no.
So Muhtar Holland translated it, and it's like 40 plus khutbas of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, and those are really, really beautiful khutbas. I mean, it's like a counselor in your hands if you are present. That's another thing. There are so many things that we have in our lives, but we are not present to enjoy those moments. I was totally absent when Arjuman greeted me, but I I became aware of her presence and her energy, and all of a sudden, you know, I was present. In that moment, she walked away after greeting Kya Haal hai? But, you know, I mean, I was really good for the rest of the day, alhamdulillah. So that's another thing. And Quran reminds us of that most of the times when we experience good things, we are very oblivious of them. We don't cherish them. We don't enjoy them. And that's why we lose happiness. So even to retain happiness, we have to be present in the moments. And Quran talks about, you know, Yusuf alayhi salam. So the entire story is in one surah, right? And after that, towards the end, Quran gives us reminders. And one of those reminders is وَكَأَيٍّ مِّنْ آيَةٍ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ يَمُرُّونَ عَلَيْهَا وَهُمْ عَنْهَا مُعْرِضُونَ. That there are so many miracles of happiness, of joy, of success, of overcoming sorrows, like the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. But most of the human beings just pass by them so obliviously that they miss the chance to enjoy that beauty in that moment. So I hope that we're not one of them, because there are miracles happening in our lives. You know, in Quran, when Quran talks about miracle of the people of cave, Quran says that حَسِبْتَ أَنَّ أَصْحَابَ الْكَهْفِ وَالرَّقِيمِ كَانُوا مِنْ آيَاتِنَا عَجَبًا. Do you think that people of cave and Raqim, you know, that's like, what do you call Raqim? Is like
So scriptures.
some kind of inscription. Were they the only miracle? Of course not. So there are miracles happening in our lives, and they are happening all the time. You know, when your child takes the first step, when we wake up every morning, you know, when we are able to think about things, when we get to see someone that we didn't see for such a long time. You know, I mean, seeing itself is such a big miracle that, what's her name? Helen Keller says that those who are able to see, they own so much. Because every image that you see, you own it. That people who don't see, don't own it. So miracle of seeing is one of the greatest miracles, but do we just stop by, appreciate it, and then move on? You know, when I leave my home, and I had, alhamdulillah, plenty of stressful years, every time I looked at the rising sun, I remember this ayah, Rabbul Mashriqi wal Maghribi la ilaha illa huwa fattakhidhu wakila, that the one, your Lord, who makes the sun rise from the east, he's the one who will take care of your affairs, right? Connecting with, as Natasha said, you know, connecting with the universe around us and believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually helps us get better. But I really think paying attention to things, paying attention to our surroundings, paying attention to what people go through when they are patient with it. People go through things and they still remain, you know, people of character and dignity, right? I mean, I always say that about Michelle, that, you know, she goes through difficulties, but I see her as a woman of character, you know. That is the focus, right? Not little problems that we are dealing with, but, you know, that you remain there and you're like, you know, Sister Rabia, this is one more day and we're going to deal with it, right? There's no complaints about it. So life is like that. There is no test-free life. There is no life of, you know, utopian happiness. It doesn't happen. It's only in Jannah, and that's what we try to achieve. Prophet ﷺ said that when Allah chooses anyone to be his servant and prophet, they are the most tested people. Why is that? Because then they're not going to say what the person with sympathy was saying. Because then they'll have this empathy. You know, the prophets go through tests so that they can stand in front of someone who's going through it and say, I've been there, done that, and I know how it is. I can hear you. And sometimes all it takes is just hear someone, right? So you see in Quran the tests of almost all the prophets, amongst them Ayyub alayhi salam, who had the biggest test, and his prayer is one of the best prayers to ask for, you know, opening from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rabbi inni masani ad-durru wa anta arhamur rahimin. Prophet ﷺ, when Aisha radiallahu anha asked her what was the most stressful day of your life, he said it was the day of five. So that prayer is very meaningful. Now what I see, and I have personally experienced it, and it is a journey of learning, that most of the times we hold on to a prayer and we keep reading it. And I see that being practiced in our education system too. You know, a lot of times we have manipulatives in math classes and we give it to kids, and so teachers give it to kids and they don't explain what are ones, what are tens, and children do whatever and then they put them away. Most of the times I feel we do the same thing. Our du'as are hands on or lips on, but they are not minds on. And we need to do that. You know, I remind my teachers, don't do hands-on activity, because if I come in and I ask the child and he or she's playing with the blocks, it has no meaning. But if I am dealing with a stressful situation and I'm praying, but I'm not connecting with the words of it, it has no meaning either. You know, I hope Allah accepts it, you know, because we're still asking Him. But it becomes more meaningful to us when we're actually taking care of it, right? So it's really important that we remain minds on and not only lips on when we are praying. And then every dua becomes meaningful. It doesn't have to be said in a very specific way, in a specific language, Urdu, Punjabi, English, Pashto, whatever. But it has to be minds on, you know, because Prophet ﷺ said Allah does not accept from a heart that's playful, engaged in everything else and still praying, right? So that's something that we need to, I mean, I learned it the hard way. And I still catch myself doing lips on and not minds on until, you know, I catch myself doing it. It does require some training. Mindfulness actually is it's a part of our faith. We practice it every day in so many ways. You know, you go to the grocery store, you're so mindful you don't buy everything. Mindfulness is part of a Muslim's life, right? Just eating halal and haram, you go to a grocery store and it turns out to be a library for you because you're reading so many things, right? Our prayer schedule is a mindful schedule because we are moving with the universe. It is a very, very mindful schedule, right? So it is part of us. Exercising a little more. Ramadan is coming. What is Ramadan? And exercising mindfulness. You know how many times I grab something and I put it in my mouth unintentionally, totally oblivious of, you know, what I'm doing, why I am eating or why I'm not eating. Right? We have this is a test of this era, but mindfulness is such an important exercise that it is connected with every single act of worship. When we're on Hajj, there's mindfulness, right? La rafasa wala fusuqa wala jidal. You cannot think of bad things, you cannot say bad things, and you cannot argue. All these exercises elevate us to become a better human being, right? I was, you know, looking into other things. I have like 2 minutes, you know. That's fine, you know, that is fine. Inshallah, we'll sit another time. That's fine.
You can go a bit over, Sister Rabia. His brother Muhammad will come and just clean up.
No, that's fine. Inshallah, you know, I'll sit down with everybody another time too. You know, I was looking at Quranic perspective of being, you know, happiness and being tested and all of that. And the question came from you, Sabahat, and from here too, that, okay, those who work, those who don't work, you know, people ask, what do you do, right? But who creates that kind of yardstick? Who creates the measure for success, right? And then in a society that is so much, where there is so much social engineering going on, there is, you know, there is sculpturing of thought and status and standards. It is all up to us how free we are of it or how enslaved we become of it, right? Because I see it not only in that do you work or do you not work? Oh, you don't work?
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, I have been dealing with questions, do you drive? Do you speak English? Just because maybe I repeat the same outfit 50 times because I don't have time to iron whatever I have, right? Or maybe I don't have done. But I think those who know me and those who know you. And they know what you have done for your families and what your contribution is. No one, you do not give anybody that right to put you down. Because Allah says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, that we have given dignity to human beings, right? And that is beyond owning professions or not owning professions, because, you know, it's not that only those who work or not work will go to Jannah, right? That all of us do move towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is our first profession, and we do need to be sincere about it. The second thing is that, and you know, we have been studying Surah An'am and from a very specific perspective, that when we're dealing with people, people have their own visions, their own limitations, right? And they don't know our story. Nobody knows my story. No, and even though we have been friends for 40, 50 years, we still don't know some of our stories, right? And that's how we are. But everybody has a right to write their own story, and everybody has a right to share their story or not to share their story. So we have, again, coming back to positive energy, that we need to hang around those people who have that kind of energy. And remove ourselves from situations where we feel that negativity is going to take over, right? Or you to meet the standards of clothing or dressing up or makeup or degrees or this or that, because you know your way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is different than mine. But our destiny is the same, right? Our struggle is the same. So it is, again, I think it's less for other people to disturb us. It is how we respond to it and how we look at it. Okay, if I have taken care of and I'm going to present myself, my 5 children, there were times when my house was not perfectly clean, because I could only do that much in 5 hours, and I did pray. So I didn't waste my right to Allah, and I did feed my children. Now, did I feed them biryani and whatever, or did I feed them boiled rice and boiled chicken? Doesn't matter. I was able to take care of them, right? So when we have clear priorities in our lives, I really think we have to be brave enough to know our priorities, and we have to be brave enough to stick to those priorities. And then most of the times, what you do, you don't want people to know. Because what you do with your free time, sometimes you don't want to make it public, because it's not right to do that. So nobody should force you to do that. And having, you know, Prophet ﷺ specifically addressing a situation like this, he said, never say, I wish I could have done it, because that opens the door of shaitan and depression. So we don't want to do that, you know. We still have life to do what we want to do with it, and we still have ability to do what we want to do with it, but going back and, you know, and sometimes people give me that kind of guilt trip, you know. You could have done this, and you could have done this. But I said, Allah chose me to raise 5 kids, and I'm so happy to do that. Because Allah knew what was my job. And I'm sure you all have similar things, you know. I don't want you to praise me or anything, but we have to be brave enough to accept what Allah has written for us, right? And my kids were not easy. She's the easiest one. They're not easy. I mean, they are a test. They're a blessing. They're a test, right? So again, in all of that, did I learn what I needed to learn? You know, and you know, my mother had that kind of feeling. You know, Meri beti itni like. And I told them, Miji, this was $1 million classroom that you would never register me for, but Allah registered me for it. And all of us get registered by Allah for $1 million classroom that nobody else can register us for, right? Because if somebody else does that, we would never turn around and speak to them ever again, right? But Allah chooses for all of us our own experiences to make us better human beings. And nobody is free of tests, you know. My mother always said, look at all these aunties who are walking around with diamonds and jewelry, because you just don't know their tests. And she would say, everybody has a homework, do your own. Everybody has a homework, do your own. So we really don't, I think the discontentment and depression comes when we keep comparing ourselves with others, you know.
Very true.
Why I have to raise my 5 kids when, look at this, her husband provides her everything, and look at her, she lives like a princess, and look at her, she has a perfect house. No, all of us are so different in our blessings and in our tests, and we need to be brave enough to accept it as it is, and be content with it, and be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He didn't put us in a worse situation than what we have, right? More than 70% to 78% of the people on this earth don't have a roof over their heads. They don't have food to eat, right? They don't have anything. And then, I mean, I don't experience it, but most of the times I see it that there's nothing in the fridge to eat, right? And there's no space in the fridge. We have to change this approach to how we're looking at things. You know, our closets are so full of clothes. We don't need to ask for more clothes. We need to ask Allah to bless us with a life that's full of health and service to humanity, right? Because clothes are meaningless if I don't exist. What are clothes going to do? What is my wealth going to do? But if I find that time for somebody else, it does make a difference, you know? And sometimes tests bring us to that reality, and that's why Allah continues to test us. But there is this ayah in the Quran, مَنْ عَمِلَ صَالِحًا مِنْهُمْ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَىٰ وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَلَنُحْيِيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً وَلَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ بِأَحْسَنِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. That whosoever does good, whether it's a male or a female, with the condition that they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does that mean? Believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meaning believing in His qualities. That even my worst hardship, I believe that He's merciful. That it is coming out of His mercy, not because of something else, right? Why me is not for me, because I know that there's mercy in this test for me, right? And we see so many examples of that in our own lives, that what we hated the most actually was the greatest blessing of our lives. Isn't that true? All of us see that, right? So Allah says that who does that, we will give them the best life here and the best in the hereafter, right? So I really think that even though all these strategies are very, very important, there is a spiritual side to mental wellness, and that is to be content, to be thankful for Allah's blessings, to be content with Allah's blessings, and not to be in competition with anybody else. Not to be in competition with anybody else. Never compare your children, your husbands, your families, you know, whatever it is. Just be thankful for what you have. And if you look at the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, there's so many tests in his life, you know. All his children died in his life, except Fatima. There was no day of peace in his life in Mecca. He comes to Medina and he's dealing with all these hypocrites who are sitting there pretending to hear him and accept him, but actually not, right? So that gives us this solace that, you know, you're not going to win the hearts of everybody, but you can keep your heart clean for it. You are not going to make everybody happy, but you can be happy with everybody. You are not going to get everything in this world, but you can enjoy what you have. You know, I have a teacher, she's a close friend of mine. She said, Sister Rabia, I don't feel like decorating my house because it's a rental home. I want to buy my house. I said, so if you don't buy a house for 20 years, you are going to delay this joy? I said, go decorate it today. That's your house. That's your space. Allah gave it to you. So sometimes we keep delaying things because of the way we look at things, right? But it has to be better than this, inshallah. So I hope we don't limit Allah's mercy to one thing or the other. I can't recall, but I can give it to you later, inshallah. You know, Allah talks about Ayyub alayhi salam and his tests, and then Allah says, after mentioning his tests and his dua, he says, Ni'mal abd. What a good man he was. And then Allah says, Innahu awwab, that he used to come back to me. So it's okay to complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there are things that nobody else will resolve except Allah. And I always say that the battle within me is more difficult to win than my argument with my child, because I win. In my argument with my children, I win. Most of the times, my argument with my friends, I have the ability to win, but it's not to win the argument, right? It's to win the heart. So you lose the argument to win the heart. And we need to do that, you know, I mean, what is more important? To win for a moment and walk away arrogant, or to let it go and be a friend forever. And a lot of times we lose our friendships and our good relationships just because we want that, you know, that moment of excitement. For mental health, you know, I really think there are two great scholars in Islamic history who have produced a lot, and you can read both of them on your own. Al-Ghazali and Rumi, both. And Ghazali is a healer of spiritual ailments. And it's a good idea to read them alone because you can talk to yourself. But if you want to read with friends, that's fine too. But for Rumi also, it's the same thing. I don't know any great translations, but live with whatever is available to you. But Rumi's translations, and he says that you cannot make your soul happy unless you connect with the one who creates the soul. So, and then one of his very powerful stories is that I gathered pearls and diamonds and so many things for the day of judgment, but in my sack I left holes. I kept making holes, and after 40 years when I looked at my sack, whatever I gathered in it, actually I was losing it. So I hope we don't become those people. So whatever sacks we have, big or small, as long as what is there, it's there with sincerity, I hope inshallah Allah will accept it. So we really just need to take care of our own souls. Prophet ﷺ's experience with depression, I mean, Taif was one experience. Another period that's called in Sirah history is Fatratul Wahy, the gap that was between the Wahy, and he was very depressed at that time. After that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Surah Al-Duha. And Surah Al-Duha is a beautiful surah. If you can just read that with Muhammad Asad's translation, it would be really good. Read that translation, read the footnotes that he has written. It's a beautiful translation, and because you know he's one of those people who had the ability to go through the Old Testament and understand it and be a scholar of it, and then you know he was a Jewish rabbi, and then accept Islam and see the beauty of Islam. So he is a person with these two lights, you know, historic lights of divine guidance, and you really see that how important it is. As Natasha mentioned, you know, letting your fist go. Prophet ﷺ, in times of anger, he used to ask people to, number one, say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim." You know, that is practicing mindfulness instead of going, you know, out of control. And then he would say, go and make wudu. And if you're standing, you sit down. And if you're sitting, you change your position. You know, lower yourself, because anger makes you rise. It makes you arrogant. So change your positions with anger. The Surah Duha is actually one of those surahs that reminds us of that, you know, when we're in test, we shouldn't think that Allah has left us alone. And actually, I think Yaqeen Institute will also host something of Surah Al-Duha, so you'll be able to see it in the future. But if you just read it from Muhammad Asad's translation, inshallah, you'll enjoy it. It is, Surah Al-Duha recommends that we have to see the daylight, and we have to see the night. And in these changes of nature, there's a lesson for us that no human being or no creation will ever stay either in bright light or in darkness, and things will continue to change. And the other thing is that tests don't mean that you are far away from your Lord. Tests mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is That's part of leadership. I wanted to share another surah with you, but I am going to give you homework, and I found out that you are very good with your homework. So after Ad-Duha, if you find time, read Surah Al-Ankabut. Surah Al-Ankabut. And that was revealed in a time that was a very, very testing time. That's Ankabut means spider, the spider. It's Surah number 29. So this surah was revealed at a time when the youth in Makkah were going through post-traumatic depression symptoms because there was so much trauma with people and they were watching it. So PTSD is historical thing, right? So this surah talks a lot about, being a believer means that tests are going to come to us. But look at it, and again, if you take Muhammad Asad's translation, that's one of the best. You can also look at Sayyid Maududi's translation, and Abdullah Yusuf Ali, I'm sure, is going to be good. I just find the footnotes very small to read at times. But Yahya Amrik also has the easy translation of the Quran for children. You guys have it, right? The first edition had very fine print. So Ankabut is a good surah because it does talk about tests and how life is. So I think we have done a serious disservice to our generation by tucking away all the problems and showing perfect life in media, which is, life can never be perfect. And we have to understand that and then continue to be thankful for what we do. I don't know what else. Quran says that man's unhappiness actually lies in one thing, وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ, that man wants to accumulate wealth as much as he can or she can. And most of our unhappiness is related to that, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and I want this. And then, people who have fame and money, they're not happy. People, actually, they end up taking their lives. People who don't have fame and money, they say, oh, we want fame and money, right? But it's not there. So happiness is where Rumi and Al-Ghazali say it from the Islamic perspective, that it is in your thankfulness, it is in your contentment, and it is sitting down and realizing and acknowledging small blessings in your life. Once in Friday class, and this is my last thing, I was, we were talking about what makes us happy. And I said, I never liked since my childhood to fold laundry. So my dad had to come sit next to me and say, मैं अपनी बेटी की मदद करूँगा, because I hated it. But he would always sit down next to me and help me do it. But then, Allah chose me to do it for 5 children and myself. And by then, I was mature enough. I was not that child who was complaining about folding clothes. Every time I opened my dryer and I was able to collect those clothes, I enjoyed that moment of warmth and the clean smell and everything. And I remember Mariam was sitting there. She said, Rabia Baji, I have done it all my life, but now I enjoy it. So I really think sometimes sharing things that this is what I find, actually healing for me. It is a responsibility, but it is a healing responsibility. We don't remain children all our lives and complain about things. But things like cooking can be therapeutic and healing. Cleaning the house can be therapeutic and healing because we have to do it. There are things that we have to do it, right? If my friend has a maid and I don't have a maid, why am I upset about it, right? Why am I in competition with that? I really think, Muhammad Asad became Muslim because he read Surah At-Takasur, and that made him change faith. He was in Germany, Surah At-Takasur, Al-Hakum At-Takasur. He said, and Germany was going through so much revolutions, and Western world was approaching to Eastern world and robbing them of their assets. and he said that I was taking train from
Who's this?
one city, Muhammad Asad, who's translator of Quran. He said, I used to take this train from one city to another city, and I realized that people are so busy that they are killing themselves to accumulate wealth that is not going to bring them happiness, and they're in this competition until they see their graves. How many of us have ever read the surah to change our behavior for one day?